pondering on what I should talk about for this summer school. The number 3 came to mind. There are many numbers that are special to people, such as 108, 13, unlucky for some, number 9, because number 7 is a sacred number, and for me, I like the number 3. And I could have chosen quite a lot of number 3s, and in fact, it took me quite a while to decide which lot of number 3s went well together. So I'm talking about 3 lots of number 3. So that altogether, that makes up 9 as well. So I decided that I would talk about the 3 things which are dearest to ourselves. Namely, ourselves. Then Theosophy, and then the divine. So we're going to start with 3 aspects of ourselves. And I know Theosophists divide human beings into 7 constituents, but for today we're going to just think of 3 of those. In other words, the body, the mind, and the spirit. So we start with the body. As I'm sure you're all aware, the body is a very complex entity, as anybody who has studied anatomy and physiology will appreciate. How many of you have actually studied anatomy and physiology? Oh, quite a few of you. Right. So I've done that 3 times in my life. The first time when I was a student nurse, too long ago to really think about. And then 20 years after that, when I was training to be a yoga teacher, and then about 20 years later than that, when I trained to be a yoga therapist. So I've done it 3 times. And I found it fascinating, and I still do find the body a fascinating thing. It's so complex. And even today, doctors and scientists are discovering new things about the body which they didn't know before. So as you know, the whole body consists of atoms, molecules, and cells, and these cells are then grouped together into organs, and the organs are grouped together into different systems. And these systems function with each other. No system in the body can work unless it's in conjunction with other systems in the body. And to keep the body healthy, there is a feedback system. In other words, if the body is well, everything happens okay, as normal. But as soon as the body gets diseased, is injured, or there's an infection, messages are sent from that part to the brain. The brain then sends further messages out so that the healing process can then take place. When the healing process has finished, then the messages stop. And that's just a very brief description of how the body stays well. And the word that I learned is homeostasis, which means balancing the body's energies and keeping fit and well. Now, when I was doing my nursing training, we studied, briefly I think, because it was a long time ago, but we studied the embryology. And I was fascinating to discover that the embryo in its very early stages actually goes through a reptilian and a fish development before the human development. Did you know that? Yeah, oh good, you all know. I'm not. You're all nodding. Okay. And why this has always remained in my mind, because it wasn't long after we did this embryology thing. I was working as a student nurse on the private wing, and a man came. He was under my care, and he had this strange, it's called a branchial cleft in the side of his neck. It was a bit of a puzzle to a lot of people, and one day the consultant came round with student doctors, and he asked the student doctors what they thought caused this thing in his neck, and none of them knew. And there was me, very minor student nurse in the background, dying to put my hand up and say, "Please, sir, I think I know." I was right. It is, or it was, a gill slit, dating from the time of the embryo, because in fact, during the embryonic stage, you get 4 gill slits on either side. The top one becomes your auditory, external auditory canal, and the other 3 are supposed to just sort of disappear. But in some occasions, they don't disappear, and so you grow up with this sort of slit in the side of your neck. And so then anyhow, this man was in to have that repaired. But though I shouldn't be chuffed, I was actually quite pleased that I knew the answers and they didn't. Yes. Now, as you know, we start life off as a baby and we grow into a child and then we become an adult, and our bodies are changing continuously all the time. The cells get replaced. Some cells very, very quickly, like some of the blood cells, they only last maybe 5-10 minutes on occasions, but other cells, I think in the heart, the cells that make up the heart muscle don't get replaced so often. But they say every 7 years you're a different person because your cells have been replaced. And what else happens when we change from a baby to a child to adult? We age. I don't have to tell any of you that, do we? Our energy levels drop. Who was talking, Cynthia, about white hair this morning and bald heads and things like that? So, right, okay, so we won't dwell on that. But one thing our bodies are designed to do, and that is to move. We've got legs. We need to move. And exercise is what keeps us fit. It might be walking, Scottish dancing, Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, whatever. It's important that our bodies stay active even into old age, because you stay fitter and you, I think you don't age quite so quickly. And they've also discovered lately that people with mental health problems, they get better, or at least they feel better, if they are active. You know, it could be yoga, but it could be just walking out in the countryside. So activity is essential to keep our bodies fit. Body image seems to be very important to people these days. Have you not noticed? Right. I'm going to be on to one of my favourite gripes in a minute. So a couple of decades ago, plastic surgery was very, very important to people. I don't think it's quite so often these days, but you had to have plastic surgery to try and delay the ageing process, or try and change your body features for one reason or another. Plastic surgery for people with a deformity is fine, but it's when it's just for beauty or for people's ego. I don't approve of it. Have you noticed how many more people have tattoos these days? Particularly girls, women, should I say. And my favourite gripe at the moment are selfies. I can't bear them. I live in London. Oh no, I don't live in London. I live outside London, but I travel up to headquarters 2 or 3 times a week, and every time there is somebody posing. And the other day there was a couple on a very boring sort of street corner with nothing behind them, you know, posing for selfies. And I thought, what's the point of that? They just have to be, there has to be an image of them everywhere. And as you know, I've just come back from Singapore at the World Congress. Singapore has about 5 million inhabitants and 17 million visitors every year. And so it was, you can imagine, it was packed. And I had 2 days of sightseeing on my own, and I went down to who's been to Singapore here? Went down to the Marine Bay where they've got the mer lion, or there's 2 statues of the mer lion. I couldn't get near them because there were crowds all around them, and there were people going like that, posing or pretending to be holding it up or something. Mostly young people, but they not only young people. And then the second day I went to the Botanic Gardens, and they've got a wonderful area of orchids. Now, we grow orchids in greenhouses. Out there, of course, it's tropic, it's outside, and there's a wonderful area of orchids. And there was one lovely place, like a gazebo, and in the middle of this gazebo was the most glorious display of pink orchids. There were several of them around. I couldn't get near them. I had to be very patient and wait to take a photograph of them until everybody had gone. But to me, it seems that you're not anybody to a lot of people, unless your image is in the media, on Facebook or whatever. So, and I blame this on sort of the fashion industry and the ever-growing celebrity culture. The body, of course, is the temple of the spirit, so it needs to be cared for, but in my opinion, not adored or pleased with endless gratification. In the little booklet at the feet of the Master, we read these words: "The body is your animal, the horse upon which you ride. Therefore, you must treat it well and take good care of it. You must not overwork it." That's good. "But you must feed it properly on pure food and drink only. Feed it properly on pure food and drink only, and keep it strictly clean. For without a perfectly clean and healthy body, you cannot do the arduous work of preparation," and that is preparation on your spiritual journey. "But it must always be you who control that body, not it that controls you." So what is meant by pure food and drink? We understand that the best food is organically grown and contains no animal product, and that alcohol should not be consumed either. I think we heard a little bit about that earlier. In the Key to Theosophy, HBB has this to say when she was asked about what a theosophist should eat: "But, as the matter stands, he must learn to live, and so we advise really earnest students to eat such foods as will least clog and weight their brains and bodies, and will have the smallest effect in hampering and retarding the development of their intuition, their inner faculties and powers." So it seems your food is very important if you want to continue your spiritual journey. You don't want to clog up your brain. And later she says, when asked about the merits of vegetarianism, and this questioner asked if somebody was not well, whether they should still be vegetarian. And the answer is, "If from illness or long habit a man cannot go without eat, why, by all means, let him eat meat. So, by all means, let him eat it. It is no crime. It will only retard his progress a little. For after all is said and done, the purely bodily actions and functions are far less important than what a man thinks and feels, what desires he encourages in his mind and allows to take root and grow there." And I think we heard a little bit about that this morning from Cynthia. Then the inquirer asks about the use of wine and spirits. HPB replies, They are worse for his moral and spiritual growth than meat. For alcohol in all its forms has a direct, marked and very deleterious influence on man's psychic condition. Wine and spirit drinking is only less destructive to the development of the inner powers than the habitual use of hashish, opium, and similar drugs. And I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago, there was a report on the news that any alcohol is bad for you. Susan, was that, who said it? Somebody said that. It's come out that you shouldn't have any alcohol at all because it's bad for you.
I thought Guinness was good for you.
Guinness is supposed to be good for you, so they say. I've never tried it, I must admit. So, quickly we'll move on to the mind. Let us now think about the mind. Like the physical body, it's a highly complex thing. And I like to think of the mind as a ladder, the lower rungs dealing with the basic animal instincts. And in fact, there is a primitive part of the brain stem, which is referred to by scientists as the reptilian brain. And the higher rungs of the ladder dealing with the human qualities such as intelligence. And thinking about it, it occurred to me how many words connected with the mind start with I or I-N. Intellect, instinct, imagination, intuition, ideas, insanity, imbecility, inanity, incomprehension. You could go on. And there are many other words associated with the mind. You have thoughts, emotions, personality, then you've got depression, phobia, dementia, psychosis, all those sort of things. And it's a vast field, so we won't be going there today. It is relatively easy to still the body, but quite hard to still the mind. The techniques used in meditation are good ways to begin the process, for while the mind with its demands is dominant and the personality needs satisfying, we will never get beyond, say, the middle rungs of this ladder of the mind, let alone the higher ones. And first we must realise that there is something more than the body and the lower mind, and really want to reach that higher state of mind, which will perhaps give us an insight into our spiritual nature and our higher selves. And we've heard an awful lot about that this week, haven't we? The mind is very powerful. It can be our friend, but it can also be our enemy. It is a tool to be used along our spiritual path and must be under our control. We must learn to discriminate between good and bad thoughts, between what we should and shouldn't do, between what is unreal and what is real. And then we may begin to realise the true nature of ourselves. Now, I expect we've all had a sort of eureka moment when it's dawned on us that there was something more to this earthly life than our bodies and material existence, and that life exists after death, and that consciousness continues, and that the real I is not the personality, but is the eternal self. And I'll share this with you because my eureka moment came when I was about 12. I was very introverted and longed to be an extrovert, like some of the other girls at school who always seemed to be laughing and having a good time. After a while, contemplating this, my decisive moment came when I realised that even if I was like the other girls, my I would still be me. So I stopped worrying about my inadequacies and just got on with being who I was. But that moment at age 12, the significance of that didn't really begin to sink in till I was an awful lot older. Talking about meditation, so a common meditation technique is to ask the following series of questions, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Who am I? Am I my body? The answer is no, because I have control over my body, and after all, at the end of the life it doesn't exist. Am I my emotions? Again, the answer is no, because I have control over my emotions. Am I my mind? The answer again, no, for I have control over my mind. Well, who then is in control? Who is this I? The answer is the higher self, beyond the workings of mind and beyond, if you think of the ladder again, beyond the topmost rung of the ladder of the mind. Some words of wisdom from at the feet of the Master. Do not mistake your body for yourself, neither the physical body, nor the astral, nor the mental. Each one of them will pretend to be the self in order to gain what it wants. But you must know them all and know yourself as their master. In theosophical terms, we know all about the manas, the higher manas, and the lower manas, so I'm not going to go into that because you're very familiar with all that. Third aspect of ourselves, the spirit. How would we describe this higher self, which is incomprehensible to the mind, even one swept free from its trappings and the need for materialism? To realize his spirit, man must work hard and long, possibly for many incarnations. And in yogic terms, it is the Atman longing to return to Brahman, or the individual consciousness merging with the universal consciousness. Spirit is not the personality, but the true individuality, the divine essence, if you like, which sometimes can be called Krishna or Christos. In the key, we are told that Atma is the divine essence which has no body, no form, which is imponderable, invisible and indivisible, that which does not exist and yet is, as the Buddhists say of nirvana. Other terms which describe the return of the soul to the One could be salvation, samadhi, enlightenment, self-realization. So I'm going to leave the three aspects of ourselves there and move on to three aspects of Theosophy. The three pillars of the Theosophical Society are study, meditation and service, as set out in the Besant lecture given by former Vice President John Algeo at the International Convention in 1998. We'll start with study. Theosophy is study is a way to discover the truths of the ancient wisdom. We have many books on the subject written by HPB and others, which we need to get to grips with if we are going to make any progress in our own lives. Study must be earnest and thorough, and will take years or even lifetimes. Besides the theosophical literature, there are numerous other books that will guide us through along the path of spirituality, and we've been looking at some of these this week, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, Yoga Sutras, the Dhammapada, and all the yoga, different yogas, and the writings of all ages on wisdom tradition. However, Theosophy is more than a set of teachings, thoughts and beliefs. As important as these are, they form just a fraction of what Theosophy is all about. To be able to understand the concepts of planes, globes, rounds, race is great if you can get your head around those things. But does it necessarily make somebody a better person just because they can understand those? Or a better theosophist who hasn't yet managed to grasp these concepts and principles? Theosophy is not just about learning, it is also about giving, about altruism, for the teachings stress that we are all one under the outer materialistic garments. We therefore try to live Theosophy, not only to study it. From the feet of the Master is this quote: "However wise you may be already on this path, you have much to learn, so much that there must be discrimination, and you must think carefully what is worth learning. All knowledge is useful, and one day you will have all knowledge. But while you only have part, take care that it is the most useful part. Study then, but first study that which will most help you to help others. So you don't study just for yourself, you study for the benefit of others, for human beings, in other words. We'll be talking a little bit about the benefit in the third part of this. Meditation is the second aspect of the Theosophical Society. The assimilation of what we have learnt comes only when we reflect on the wise words we have read or heard. We meditate and assimilate and put into practice the right way of living. We can apply Theosophy to all aspects of our lives, at home, in the workplace, in our relationships, in our behaviour, our speech, our actions, wherever we are and whatever we are doing. Daily meditation should become as much of a habit as getting up in the morning. And there's more words from the key, and this says, meditation is silent and unuttered prayer. Or as Plato expressed it, the ardent turning of the soul towards the divine, not to ask any particular good, as in the common meaning of prayer, but for good itself, for the universal supreme good. That's the end of the quote from Plato, of which we are part on earth, and out of the essence of which we have all emerged. Therefore, adds Plato, remain silent in the presence of the divine ones until they remove the clouds from thy eyes and enable thee to see by the light which issues from themselves not what appears as good to thee, but what is intrinsically good. Moving on to the third aspect, which is service. A person cannot call him or herself a true theosophist until they put what they have learnt into practice. And that is service to others. We all have different talents and different personalities, which will take us along different paths of service. We should choose the way with which we are most comfortable, confident, and capable. We must not try to be everything to all people, as that will waste time and effort and not accomplish the intended goal. Our work must be done without thought of rewards or recompense, just as in the Karma Yoga. A life lived for others will bring the reward of a sense of satisfaction, but not as a smug or proud satisfaction, which could be very tempting, but the satisfaction of a job well done that achieved the intended outcome. We cannot ignore the fact that this world is full of misery, injustice, hunger, and oppression. It is as if the world was diseased, and while some symptoms of this disease can be alleviated, it is the cause of the disease that ought to be addressed. Wise men say that it is the ignorance of man's real nature that causes the problems, the feelings of separateness which divide humanity. And that's come up as well during this week. Theosophical service, to my way of thinking, is to spread the word of the ancient wisdom and the oneness of all life. The three aspects of Theosophy then, study, meditation and service, are like the legs of a three-legged stool. All three have to be in place for the stool to be a useful piece of furniture. Imagine trying to sit on a three-legged stool if there are only two legs. It wouldn't work, would it? It follows then that the three aspects of theological conduct are equally important to us as we aspire towards a more spiritual and theosophical life. When we apply learning, compassion, and service to our daily lives, and when we unite in spreading the knowledge of the unity of humankind, then we can really start to make a difference to our world. Now, the third part of this talk, the three aspects of the divine. Now, the ancient Greeks saw the divine with the qualities of goodness, beauty, and truth. In theosophical terms, the absolute has no attributes and is beyond all comprehension. So, why try to describe the divine as having these three attributes of goodness, beauty, and truth? I think it is because these are something that we, ordinary human beings, can connect with, and which could bring us closer to our own divinity if we could apply these same attributes to ourselves. We start with goodness. Goodness is a virtue. What is the definition of a virtue? Bernier describes goodness as beauty revealed. I see it as a beneficial quality of humankind that is shown in different ways at different times. There are several popular phrases that use the word goodness. One of them that springs to mind is when you say, through the goodness of my heart, or through the goodness of his heart, he did something or other. So goodness is where? In the heart. For some people, goodness has to be cultivated, while others it comes naturally. In these people, it is intuitive and can break down barriers between people. And I'm sure you all know people who can do that. Let us consider some examples of goodness. And these are just a few. An act of loving kindness, a loving gesture, working for the well-being of others, being helpful, sympathetic and understanding, having no desire for reward or recognition, and doing no harm to people, animals, or the environment, and putting others before yourself. Someone who is naturally good, in other words, who is not naturally good, in other words, naturally bad, may have a change of heart and start living a new life following a traumatic event. I was thinking, say, of a prisoner. He'd obviously committed some crime and gone into prison and found the experience so awful that it changed his attitude. By behaving in a goodly, or maybe we could say godly manner, we can set a good example to others, for actions speak louder than words. And if everyone lived their lives with the motto, do as you would be done by, etched into their hearts, the world would be a much better place for all of us. A world full of people showing loving kindness, consideration and humility should be the goal of a theosophist. When we look around at the modern world, we see conflict, hatred, brutality, thirst for power and supremacy, which are just the opposite of what we should try and achieve. It's a sad state to be in, I feel. Goodness should come from the heart and not from the mind. For as soon as one starts thinking about deliberately being a good person, then the motive must be questioned. There may well be an ulterior motive behind the action, possibly for prestige or satisfaction or for the benefit of the doer in some way or another. The actual act may be good, but the intention behind the deed has to be pure, or there could be serious karmic consequences. By allowing the heart to be in control instead of the fickle mind, everyone reaps the benefit. True goodness is therefore a deep, heartfelt, instinctive action. There are many examples of true goodness, such as people risking their own lives to save others from a fire, say, or from drowning. And sadly, all too common these days, there are people who try to prevent an attacker from harming others with a gun or a knife. These people are often called heroes, but some are reluctant to be so labelled. Let's move on to beauty now. I started by saying that goodness is beauty revealed, but we could also say it the other way around, that beauty is goodness revealed. And these words come from Radha Bernier. She wrote an awful lot about beauty, if you want to look it up. We use our senses to appreciate beauty, and I think mainly through the eyes and the ears. There is a well-known expression, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Most of the time, we appreciate beauty through the outer eye, like we see beautiful landscapes, faces, objects, both natural and man-made, such as beautiful buildings. The Taj Mahal is one. And what we've learnt about through sacred geometry this week, I think, applies very much to how we appreciate beauty. What else would people consider beauty? Some might think an expensive, sleek motor car has beauty. Others might think a dress is beautiful. And I'm sure you can think of lots of other things which you would consider beautiful. But could we see beauty with an inner eye? J. Krishnamurti had this to say: "There is a beauty that offers no stimulation. One comes upon that beauty not by desiring, wanting, longing for the experience, but only when all desire for experience has come to an end." Implying then that we should learn to look on beauty from the depths of our soul without attachment to the pleasure that beauty gives us. Superficial beauty is a common experience, but to see inner beauty, we have to be in touch with our higher selves for a transforming experience that brings us closer to divinity. So how could we define beauty? There are certain elements or characteristics that exist in all that could be considered or recognized as beautiful. And one of these is order. Every object of beauty has a certain order to it. And I mean not a mechanical order such as it necessarily is a geometrical shape, but as an inherent order that is observed in natural objects such as a beautiful flower. There are 4 component parts of order, and these are 1, harmony, 2, balance, 3, proportion, and 4, symmetry. A building that has these qualities, as I said a moment ago, is the Taj Mahal with its noble and perfect proportions. To many people, including myself, a simple structure devoid of all ornamentation is far more pleasing to the eye than a very fussy building with lots of bits stuck on it all over the place. I think you can appreciate simple, plain lines much better. Though some of these buildings, very attractive, but to me they don't necessarily have the intrinsic beauty. There are other ways of appreciating beauty. So let's just think about it. An astronomer would see beauty in the universe, wouldn't he or she? Mathematicians see it in their equations. Pam, maybe. Anatomists see the intricate workings of the body as order and a form of beauty. And to me, beautiful music, as my introduction said, I like listening to classical music. I can't play, but I do love listening to it. But to appreciate it, for me, it has to have harmony, rhythm, and be free of discord. If anything comes onto the radio, which I don't like to listen to, or I try, it might be sort of more modern piece of music. I quite like some modern pieces of music, but others to me are just sounds, and they're not music. So I listen for 5 minutes, and I think, right, turn the radio off. Silence is preferable. That's just me. If you go to a concert, you can't actually turn it off, sadly. You have to put up with the prom concerts. Usually you go because there's some Beethoven or Bruckner or Brahms, but you usually have to put up with 5 or 10 minutes of some world first performance, which may or may not be very pleasing to your ear. Everywhere one sees order, there has to be beauty too. Where there is a lack of order, balance and harmony, to me there is no beauty. Seeing beauty is not the same as knowing beauty, for beauty has to be an inner feeling. Beauty can often be fleeting, such as a sunset. Doesn't last very long, 10, 15, 20 minutes maybe. Beauty can be seen in the short life of a mayfly, or a flower that just opens for one day, and that's the end of its life. The blossom on a tree, which soon changes into a piece of fruit, or gradually changes into a piece of fruit. So even though beauty might not last, the impression and image of the beauty observed will remain in our hearts and minds. And I say this because when I've heard a piece of music for the very first time and really appreciate it, that is the time I remember. I don't remember subsequent hearings of that same piece of music. And you could say when you see a piece of art, whether it's a painting, a sculpture, or whatever, the first time you ever see that is the time you will remember. It stays in your mind and in your heart. Forms are transitory, yes, but beauty is eternal. Beauty as an aspect of the divine can only be recognized, I think, by the divine within us. And according to the voice of the silence, before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained. True beauty is not dependent on an object or a need for an external stimulus. Beauty is a state of freedom from the recognition and identification of the self and its likes and its dislikes. In that freedom, The beauty of all objects points to the one. Knowledge of that may be called beauty or love, but it is also truth, known in the worldless and pure depths of the heart. So this now leads us on to the last aspect of the divine, which is truth. The statements, goodness is beauty revealed, and beauty is goodness revealed, lead us, I think, quite naturally to this statement. Truth is goodness and beauty revealed. When goodness comes from the heart and the higher mind, and when beauty is appreciated by the inner eye or ear, then we see truth. Separation and ignorance hide the real truth from ourselves. What is truth? It is the law that governs all life, from the level of the mineral world to that of the human being. All forms of life are part of the divine plan. The oneness of all life is what we believe in. But how do we know this? To move from belief to knowledge takes time, effort, and dedication. We should start by acting on the belief that we are all one, despite the many differences between us. Each and every one of us has a divine soul that is eternal. We are brothers and sisters of the same family of souls. This talk has considered three aspects of ourselves, of Theosophy, and of the divine. The three aspects of the human being took us from the gross physical through the mental to the spiritual, the highest achievable state of being. Our eventual goal, if not in this life, then in future existence. Then we considered the three aspects or pillars of the Theosophical Society. Study, so that what we learn we can pass on to others. Meditation, so that we can assimilate the verity of the teachings within ourselves. And then service, when we give without thought of ourselves. All these, when worked on diligently, bring us closer to the divine within ourselves. And lastly, we considered three aspects of the divine: goodness, beauty, and truth. We discovered that truth is revealed by the other two, and that truth, is the law that pervades the whole world. We can play our part in making this troubled world of ours a better place. And finally, there's a quote from I.K. Taimni, and he put this all together in a few simple words. By talking and lecturing, and we do a lot of that, don't we? We can affect the minds of men, can communicate ideas and change convictions. By emotional fervour, we can arouse their passions and emotions and make them do anything in the heat of the moment. But to touch and arouse their deeper intuitions and aspirations, we must ourselves be spiritually awake and trying to live the inner life of the Spirit. There must be taking place within us that intense activity and rapid unfoldment of our higher principles, which inevitably find expression in the outer personality, in a serene spiritual outlook and a balanced, righteous life.